We've got an exciting review for you today because this is a bar that has blown my expectations away. When we first saw this thing at the Arnold, I thought it might have just been another thing trying to copy the Gaspari bar, a curl bar where the handle rotates within the bar, which I've seen several companies take a shot at over the years. But this is so much more. After using it almost religiously for a month, I have to say I'm more than impressed, and I've done a ton of different exercises on it. Everything from different variations of bench press to more curl variations than I can count, and I'm still finding ways to use it. Now, before you get too excited, and no, I'm not talking about the B-rolls of my wife, I mean you getting so excited about this bar that you spend all your money using my affiliate links in the description, let's talk about exactly what this bar is, since you guys had a lot of questions when we posted about this on our Instagram and when Winnie made that Patreon video about it. We'll also cover my thoughts on what you can do with it, how all of this works, and where it can be improved. Now, if you're looking at everything here and saying this is just too much, don't worry, I asked Resistance and Rotation, that's the company that makes this bar and who sent it to us for free for the review, to send me a bunch of extras so I could demonstrate everything it could do as clearly and as thoroughly as possible. Also, this is the modular version of the CUBB bar, but there are 4 distinct variations of it, which we'll talk about, because if your needs don't match mine, and by that I mean you're not some wannabe fitness influencer who couldn't hack it, so he collects equipment instead of using it, you might be interested in the other 3 options, which are simplified and cheaper versions of this. But before we get into those, let me explain how this works and why you might want it by talking you through some of my thoughts and experiences on what feels like countless exercises I've tried on it. The complete upper body bar, that's where the name CUBB comes from, to put it in its simplest forms, and I'm really not doing it justice here because it can do more than this, but it's a specialty bar with rotating handles that you can add resistance to. So again, keeping it simple because it does a lot more than curls, but imagine a curl where you can go from a fully pronated grip to supinated and back all within your normal range of motion, which you can just do with the dumbbell, right? But here I can add a band, and now not only am I hitting the inner and outer heads of the bicep with that rotation, and you can see how difficult this is on camera, but I'm also torching my forearms. And it works very well for all kinds of curls, Zopman, pronated, or maybe you hurt your brachioradialis trying to preach or curl 135 pounds for a YouTube video because you're an idiot and certain grip angles hurt when you curl. Well, with this bar, you can literally set the angle to anything because there's nothing telling you have to rotate the handles throughout the exercise or even use the bands, which is a great thing about it. I can set it one way for bench, another way for lat pull downs, or maybe somewhere between for rows. And since I have the modular version, I can change the grip width by swapping out the center section, which means it can be used in a lot of different ways. Which probably makes this a good time to talk about the rotating handles and movements like bench where you might not want them to rotate while you're pressing. Because this handle is locked inside the frame and they're using industrial quality linear bearings that run along the side here, when you're in a pressing movement, you can still rotate them with some effort, but since there's no bearings running along the top or bottom surfaces, the handles actually stay pretty well in place, at least enough to make bench pressing feel stable, and I say that having benched 255 pounds on it. Its maximum weight capacity is 315 pounds, but that 255 did feel good. So they've intentionally designed the bar to have a little bit of internal resistance so you can basically set the handles how you want and keep them in position, which is useful when you don't want them to rotate during skull crushers, curls, and other exercises, but they'll still rotate smoothly when you want them to. I think this could be a powerful tool for physical therapy or to work around injuries. If I'm an arm wrestler, rock climber, tennis player, hockey player, just some dude who wants really big arms, this may be a cool piece of equipment for you. But before we go even further down the rabbit hole of exercises I tried with this and how well they all worked, let's talk about the other versions of this, because not everyone is necessarily going to want a bar that can do so many things. So let's start with the simplest and work our way up to the modular. There's the CUBB cable, which was designed to be more light and compact, as you'll see by the circular frame and lack of sleeves. And as the name suggests, it was meant to be used with cables. The handles still rotate, and it comes with the carabiner attachment and the red and green resistance bands. Actually, they all come with the red and green bands. From there, you've got the CUBB Lite, which is basically the cable version without the cable attachment, but you can purchase this separately. But with this version, they've added the resistance band pegs, and I seem to have lost mine. So they've also added the feet on the bottom, so you could do push-ups with it, much like you would a pair of perfect push-up handles. But as with all versions, you can add resistance if you want, and I've been using mine to do static holds during push-ups, which are killer on your forearms. But I will say the band pegs can get in the way of your range of motion a little, and they've grazed my nipples a few times, which is a bit more than I normally ask for from my bars. The third version is the fixed bar, which is similar to this bar in that it's back to its octagonal shape, but it doesn't have the ability to swap out the various parts. So the center section and sleeves are permanently attached, so you can choose the width of your centerpiece. If you're wondering why they're offering all these versions, it's because they're trying to give people options so you don't have to pay for all these extra features that you might not want, which I actually think is a pretty smart move. Now for the modular, which is the biggest and best version because it gives you the freedom to build it to your wants and needs, since you can swap out the various components. I have pretty much all of the options here. I have the sleeve extensions, which make it rackable, and it is easily rackable in both 47 and 49-inch racks. I've got both center sections, so I can make the sleeves 16 or 25 inches on center, though you can technically order this center piece at different lengths. But for me, having two widths means I can vary my grip width and keep it closer for something like skull crushers. It actually works pretty well for overhead press because of this tapered center section. And much like a flat multi-grip bar, I've enjoyed using it for close grip bench, and it's pretty well balanced. But my absolutely favorite exercise with this bar is Arnold presses. Like everyone else, when I do an Arnold press, I use my dumbbells, and my logic goes something like this. Arnold says it works all three heads of the delt, and Arnold was almost as big as me, so he must know what he's talking about, but I really don't feel it that well throughout the deltoids. But listen, strap a band on this thing in Arnold press, and holy crap, you and your shoulders are gonna feel it. I really hope I finish this rep before my arms give out and this bar lands on my head kind of way. But now, powered by this bar, I'll never get bullied again for having no delts. Just gotta fix my horrible face and carefully craft every single word I say in a video. All right, let's talk about changing the various components and the bar's construction. And then we'll get to where I'd like to see some changes, because as an engineering teacher of 17 years, the first thing I thought of when I saw this was more parts often means more problems. And this does have a lot going on, but it's also very well made, and there's a reason for that. The company that manufactures this bar actually produces automotive parts for Ford, GM, Harley, and others. So even though the CUBB bar in front of me is a prototype, it's easily the best made prototype I've been sent. This was well engineered and clearly tested before they showed it off. They even have a robot that's been continuously running for over a month testing it. And believe me, as someone who's been shown what a lot of these companies do before sending their products out, these guys have done their homework. And with a great build quality on the aluminum handle section, the steel center and sleeves, and with bearings rated at 300 RPMs and 35,000 pounds, and me beating the crap out of this thing for a month while I tested it, I really think this will last. But if something were to break, like a band or one of these pegs, you can buy replacement parts for pretty much any part of this on their site. which brings us to changing the components. It's actually a pretty straightforward and quick system once you get used to it. To remove a piece, you just ignore this nice little diagram they put on it, like my wife does, and then whisper to yourself, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, and don't even lie to me and pretend you don't say that every time. Then once you've unscrewed it, you hold the safety button down because it won't come off without the safety, and you kind of just rotate and jiggle and it'll eventually pull off. Now, I say eventually because as you put a part on, which is just the opposite process, except you don't have to hold down the safety, you'll see you have to line up a tooth on this outside washer, and then there's a flat spot in the inner bar that kind of lines up to the adapter. It's really not that difficult, and they've added markings to help you, but it might take a few attempts at first. But now that I've done it dozens of times, I don't think swapping stuff even takes me a minute. Now, just because some moron online loves this bar doesn't mean it's for everyone. It is a specialty bar, and while it does things other equipment can't, that doesn't mean it's going to replace barbell, dumbbells, and other essential pieces in your training. For me, it's become another tool I can use to hit things differently and keep things interesting. So while I've benched and rowed with it and it worked, I probably won't actually ever use it for those things. So if you're looking at the prices and thinking, that's a lot of money to spend on a specialty bar, you're right, but then again, how many of us have unique pieces of equipment we've spent more on? Now, if my wife is watching, definitely not me. But changing the parts, it can be a little slow at first, and the black oxide on the steel parts, it's well done, but it will wear down over time, and I'd like to see a textured powder coat or a little bit more grip to the handles, because while this isn't bad, it is a bit smooth. They are trying to work on a solution that bolts on, since you can't actually knurl this because it's cast as a single piece, which is what they're testing here, but I'm not sure what they'll come up with in the end. But I do know they've got a lot of stuff planned for this, for physical therapy and other add-ons. What I like about this bar is it can do a lot more than I originally thought when I first saw it and figured it was just some kind of gimmick. Adding resistance to a lot of these movements has me really thinking about how I train, and being able to swap components and build it how I want for specific movements has made this a lot more versatile than I'd have imagined. Now, is it perfect? No, but a lot of equipment comes through here, and I have no intention of this thing leaving. As always, thanks to our Patreons, links in the description with the link to this bar, and make some kind of clever comment and hit that like button to help the channel out. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.